to work with Nat Geo? I mean, it must be a dream.
It is, and I feel like have to pinch myself all the time. My first experience with Nat Geo was actually as an intern in college. I interned in the travel department, and I was writing little things for their blog and doing web production. And it was actually because of an event that happened while I was an intern that it really changed the course of my work. They have an annual event called the Explorer Symposium where they bring in all of these grantees and explorers, and I just got to watch as an intern. And then after I think the second day, I went home, I filled out my change of major form from communications to marine science. And then the next year, I applied for and received a Young Explorer grantee, which is what it was known as at the time, which is Nat Geo funded my research as an undergrad. And that really, since then, I've gone on, have had 3 grants with them funding my research. And then even then, I never in a million years thought I would be in a place where I was filming a show for National Geographic. So it really is, I have to pinch myself all the time.
That's a drastic change in career field.
Yeah, and I always loved science, but in my early stages of my undergrad, I felt like I didn't really fit in the biology courses that I was taking. I was with a lot of pre-meds, and people knew that they wanted to do a fast track to graduate school, and I just didn't think that was the right fit for me. But it was because I wasn't looking in the right places within the scientific field, and being able to see role models that are able to combine the conservation side with the outreach and education side was really just the perfect fit.
Wow, amazing. Well, now let's talk about Ocean Explorers because you're part of them, and talk about your part. I got a chance to see the first episode where you're in. So can you tell people what you're in for?
Sure. So the way Ocean Explorers is structured, it follows this team of 4 explorers as they travel all around the world on OceanX, or yeah, on the vessel Ocean Explorer. And my role was to be a scientist that came on in one of their locations. So I was the one of the local scientists in the Hammerhead Highway episode. I am based out of Miami, Florida. At the time, I was getting my PhD, and I studied great hammerhead sharks. So it was the perfect fit where I got to bring on my science and my tools and my research questions, and then work with the explorers throughout the course of our time in Florida to try to answer some of those questions.
Wow. And there was a scene impressive how you guys put attach a camera on one of these hammerhead sharks and under 5 minutes.
Yeah, so when, my research was all using biologgers, which are like Fitbits for sharks that we would put on the hammerheads, and they would swim around for about a day or two, and then we go and collect that tag and get the data. And when you're working with any animals, obviously the health and safety of the animal is the most important thing. And especially when you're working with a really large animal like a hammerhead shark, there's a lot of things that have to be in place to protect the health and safety of the people as well. So the health and safety of the crew and the animal, overall, most important thing. And part of that means that you need to work up that animal really quickly. Pretty much as quickly as you can while maintaining the health and safety of the crew. Hammerheads in particular are kind of sensitive, meaning that they can really get stressed out if you keep them on the line too long. So it is really part of a good, effective data collection method to be able to work them up quickly.
Wow. Usually we would see the trying to like tag them or send her underwater, but I had never seen above water, just literally grabbing them and holding them. And that's is that tactic used commonly?
Yeah, so we obviously there's a lot of permitting and a lot of training that has to go into the place to handle these animals. And in a perfect world, if you can answer your research question without ever having to touch any of the animals, that's ideal. But the specific types of research questions we were asking require us to put a piece of equipment on the animal. And now there's a lot of other things that go into making sure that equipment is designed to be minimally invasive. And we actually use a handling and fishing method that is also scientifically permitted and designed to minimize the stress on the animal. So it is definitely a don't try this at home kind of situation. We go through a lot of training to make sure we can work up the animal safely and effectively. But we're really fortunate, based in Miami, in South Florida, we're really fortunate that these hammerhead sharks come quite close to shore compared to some other places. So we were tagging those sharks really just, a mile or so offshore of West Palm Beach. And part of that is because you've got the Gulf Stream that comes really close. So we're really fortunate, based here in South Florida, that we can do some of this research so close to shore that we couldn't do in other places for the great hammerheads.
I see. And it's this device this tag was not only a camera, but also a speed sensor. Wow,
Mm-hmm.
technology it surprises us.
Yeah, so the biologgers, there are all kinds of different biologgers with all sorts of different sensors. The smallest ones you can literally put on like bats and hummingbirds. I mean, they can get really small. These particular sensors, we had a speed sensor, which captured speed, acceleration, magnetism, which helps us look at where the animal is oriented compared to the Earth's surface, as well as depth and temperature. And then my research was combining a lot of these different sensors to ask really big questions about great hammerheads, because even though they are an extremely well-recognized species, they're really hard to study. So there's a lot that we still need to understand about their fundamental biology and ecology. So for example, I can take that speed data, combine it with the temperature data, and run it through a lot of math, which I won't bore you with, but then estimate how many calories that shark has to eat in a day. And then from there, there's all sorts of things we can see about estimating how many prey items they're taking out of the ecosystem every year and things like that. So speed is a really important metric to answer some of these questions.
And you guys also covered the geometric, I'm probably saying it wrong.
Yeah, the geomagnetic.
Geomagnetic. So can you explain that a little more?
So my dissertation research did not look at geomagnetic location and navigation. I can tell you, yeah, I can tell you more about the questions that I was answering with that data, which are not necessarily covered in the show.
Oh, I see. Well, you can tell us anyway.
Okay.
For us.
So another thing we can do with those tags is, I mentioned there's this magnetism sensor within our tag, and I can combine that with other metrics like acceleration and speed, and then look at the three-dimensional movement of that shark once it leaves the surface. So I can essentially look at how they are swimming below the surface, which gives us a really unique view that we wouldn't be able to get otherwise. And the interesting thing, we can combine it with other sensors like the video sensor, where we see what the shark is seeing. So I can look at the data and say, okay, this shark made this really interesting movement here. And then I can see a snapshot of what that shark is seeing at that time.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thanks.
Brilliant. So, out of curiosity, have you had a chance to watch any of the other episodes?
I have, and it's really spectacular because, of course, I only saw one tiny sliver of the research that was done over the course of the whole series. And so it's surreal to now be able to have this really unique situation where I got to see what the ship was like. I got to meet the crew and meet all of the explorers, and then also be a viewer that follows along as they continued their expedition across the Atlantic. And so, for example, I loved the the work that they did with whales and like putting tags on the deep diving whales. That was so interesting. The next one I'm going to watch is the six gill shark episode. That's what I'm really excited for. So I've seen the two whale episodes with the humpbacks and I think the sperm whales, and then I've seen the hammerhead episode. But and then the other part is I can't wait to watch the ones where they go up to the Arctic.
Yes, I watched The Kingdom of the Polar Bears.
Ugh.
That was one of my favorites, and oh my gosh, I admit I got teary-eyed
Oh
just
gosh.
to learn about how bad climate change is hurting them and not getting enough food.
And I think that's one of the most interesting parts of this whole show is that it's the snapshot into ways you can apply this incredible technology and this incredible vessel and all the brain power that goes along with it to answer a lot of different questions with a real wide range of species. I mean, you've got humpback whales and we have the sharks and they're in the deep sea, and there's a cool part in the whales where they're looking at the squid. I mean, you're able to apply this technology in so many different ways. But the key thing there is that they're all being applied towards conservation questions. And I think, we are in a state where our ocean is in trouble. We know that with climate change and plastic pollution and overfishing, there are so many stressors that our ocean is facing. And we need really big action that brings together a lot of different areas of expertise and a lot of different types of technology in order to be able to fight back with these issues. So I hope that the viewers get excited about the science and then also leave feeling inspired, knowing that you don't actually need the technology like a deep sea submersible in order to make a difference with ocean conservation. Anyone and everyone has a hand in a healthy ocean.
That's very true. Well, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations and being part of Ocean Explorers. That's narrated by James Cameron. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, hearing James Cameron introduce me in the show was a pretty surreal moment.
Amazing, amazing. Well, good luck, and I look forward to seeing more of you in Nat Geo because I love Nat Geo. Those are like
Great.
those are my favorite programming to cover.
Well, it was so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for your questions.
You're welcome. Thank you.